الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعد نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اقتفى أثره واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. Then inshallah this is our second reading from the book entitled شرح أصول اعتقاد أهل السنة والجماعة. شرح أصول اعتقاد أهل السنة والجماعة, the explanation of the fundamentals of the Aqidah of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah by Abil Qasim Hibatullah Ibn al-Hasan ibn Mansur al-Lalaka'i al-Tabari rahimahullah ta'ala, who died in the year 418 after the Hijrah. Sharh Usul Ittiqad Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah by Abul Qasim Hibatullah Ibn al-Hasan ibn Mansur al-Lalaka'i rahimahullah ta'ala. And we finished the author's opening to his introduction. The author's opening to his introduction, i.e. his thana ala Allah. How he began his book with praising Allah, including in his praise of Allah that which is the core topic of the book. And this is what we call in Arabic bara'atul istihlal, or a clever introduction. How an individual includes in their introduction the topic of the book in an indirect fashion, either by double entendres and puns and things of this nature, or by way of incorporating themes from the topic inside of their praising of Allah and salat upon the Prophet. Even though it might not be pointing out what the topic is, it incorporates words and plays on words in that fashion. So the author, he began his book with the praise of Allah, and inside of that praise, he had this, what is called bara'atul istihlal, or this clever opening. Now after that, he transitions with the statement amma ba'd to begin the actual introduction, in which he's going to lay down and present to us what the book is about. First talking about what is the usul of Ahl Sunnah, the usul of the i'tiqad of Ahl Sunnah, the foundation or the fundamentals of the belief of Ahl Sunnah. And then he's going to talk about the history of innovation. And he's going to talk about some of the people historically who transmitted for us the correct aqidah from the various cities and areas of the Islamic world. And then after that, he'll begin by bringing the narrations from the Salaf as it pertains to the correct aqidah and as it pertains to the refutation of the people of innovation. So the author rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, أما بعد فإن أوجب ما على المرء معرفة اعتقاد الدين وما كلف الله به عباده من فهم التوحيد وصفاته وتصديق رسله بالدلائل واليقين والتوصل إلى طرقها والاستدلال عليها بالحجج والبراهين. The author, he said, as for what follows, أما بعد, or as to proceed, as for what follows, then indeed the most obligatory thing upon any individual is the awareness of the correct creed of the religion, is awareness of the correct aqidah of the religion, or in the religion. The most obligatory thing on any person is awareness of the religion's correct aqidah, the correct aqidah of this religion, as well as what Allah has given the responsibility of it to his slaves regarding understanding Tawheed and the characteristics or the sifat of Allah. The most obligatory thing on any person is awareness of the correct aqidah of the religion, as well as that which Allah has burdened or entrusted the slave with regarding understanding what is the tawheed of Allah and what are the attributes of Allah, as well as believing and confirming as true the messengers. All of this being done with the evidence and with certainty, and arriving at that by way of the path of proving things based on evidence with clear arguments and undeniable proofs. And some of these words are interchangeable, but we flip them up for the sake of not saying the same word over and over, or lack of a better translation. So here the author, rahimahullah ta'ala, he's saying that the first obligation upon an individual is awareness of the correct aqidah and what Allah has entrusted the slave with regarding understanding the tawheed of Allah and the attributes of Allah, as well as believing in the messengers with the evidence and having certainty in that thing or in that, as well as arriving at all of that by way of the pathway of what the evidence shows, what the proof dictates. Doing all of that with clear arguments and undeniable proofs. Wallahi, this phrase is in and of itself, and we're going to find ourselves often stuck unwrapping the words of the author, because this introduction, mashallah, he uses such great expressions that concisely and clearly point out for us this religion. Sometimes we see people, they get exhausted or bothered or tired regarding how much the Salaf or the Salafi, the individual who is Salafi, talks about Aqidah. And you find those type of individuals constantly saying, why do we have to keep talking about Aqidah? Where do they get this importance that they place on Aqidah from? Wallahi, this is not as big of a deal as they make it seem. But in this introduction, you'll see that this is not something that our brothers and our sisters have arrived at independently. Instead, this is something that was embedded and ingrained in them by the Salaf. That Aqidah is the first obligation. Knowing the correct Aqidah, knowing what Allah gave you the burden, the responsibility of understanding regarding His Tawheed. It's your job. And likewise, knowing about His attributes, believing in the messengers, and doing all of this with evidence and having certainty in your evidence. And this is a quality that is unique for Ahl Sunnah, that we have certainty in what we believe, because what we believe is based on the evidence, and the evidence is what was said by Allah and His Messenger. And therefore, there is no doubt regarding it. It is of the utmost validity and clarity. And he talks about how to arrive at that belief, the way, the path that needs to be followed, the methodology, the minhaj that needs to be followed. What tawassul ila turuqiha. How do you understand the aqidah? How do you understand the tawheed? How do you understand the sifat? How do you believe in the messengers? You need to arrive at that following the pathways that are based upon evidence, that provide the clear arguments and the undeniable proofs. He says, وَكَانَ مِنْ أَعْظَمِ مَقُولٍ وَأَوْضَحِ حُجَّةِ وَمَعْقُولٍ كِتَابُ اللَّهِ الْحَقُّ الْمُبِينُ ثُمَّ قَوْلِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ وَصَحَابَتِهِ الْأَخْيَارِ الْمُتَّقِينَ ثُمَّ مَا جَاءَ عَلَيْهِ ثُمَّ مَا أَجْمَعَ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَفُ الصَّالِحُونَ ثُمَّ التَّمَسُّكُ بِمَجْمُوعِهَا وَالْمَقَامُ عَلَيْهَا إِلَى يَوْمِ الدِّينِ. And here, these 5 things, when we're going over this book in the Masjid, we like to say that these 5 things, if you want you can say that this is the usul of the i'tiqad of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. If this book, one of the things that can be confusing to some people is that he entitled the book an explanation of the fundamentals of the usul of the belief of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. An explanation of the fundamentals of the aqidah of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Shar i'tiqad Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Shar usul i'tiqadi Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Somebody might say, if it's an explanation, what was the original book? And there isn't an original book that he goes on and explains in this book. Instead, this book, he originally wrote it as the foundation. So a person might ask, well, what is he explaining? What are the usul of the aqidah of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah? And this is important because you find a lot of people, when they're asked the question, what does it mean to be Salafi? Right? Or did somebody do something that expels him from Salafiyah? That action he did, he's no longer Salafi, or he's still Salafi, or he's not Salafi. And when you ask them the question, well, what makes a person Salafi? Right? What if a person exemplifies it? Does he establish for himself and entitle himself to be recognized as a person upon the methodology of the Salaf? And what things that if a person does it, expel him and remove him from the methodology of the Salaf? Do sins remove a person from the methodology of the Salaf? Do mistakes exclude a person from the methodology of the Salaf? These are things that we have to understand. And so here the author is explaining what are the fundamentals of the Aqidah of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, in order that we can know them, so we can know whoever has these fundamentals, then inshallah, he is with us. May Allah make us with the Salaf. And whoever is in a pathway other than this, then he is outside of this da'irah. He is outside of the loop in this matter. And therefore is entitled to be talked about as someone other than. But as far as the individuals who have a mistake or have a deficiency or have a sin, but their fundamentals are sound, then inshallah this person, he's not expelled from the da'irah, from the group of those who try to follow and establish the fundamentals of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. So these 5 things that he mentioned here, and then there's going to be a couple of more on the affirming and the denying, as we'll talk about. But these 5 things to start off, these are the fundamentals of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. The author, he says, وَكَانَ مِنْ أَعْظَمِ مَقُولٍ, and it was from the greatest things that were ever said. From the greatest things that were said, وَأَوْضَحِ حُجَّةِ وَمَعْقُولٍ, and the clearest of evidence and intellect, the clearest proofs and the most obvious intellect is Kitabullah al-Mubin, the book of Allah that is clear and clarifying of other things. The book of Allah is clear and it brings clarity to other things. That is the first fundamental. ثُمَّ قَوْلِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ, then the statement of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, i.e. this is the second fundamental. وَصَحَابَتِهِ الْأَخْيَارِ الْمُتَّقِينَ, and his Sahaba who were chosen and pious, or good and pious. This is the third fundamental. The book of Allah, the Sunnah of the Messenger, the Sahaba, the statements of the Sahaba, al-Akhyar al-Muttaqeen. ثُمَّ مَا أَجْمَعَ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَفُ الصَّالِحُونَ, then that which was agreed upon by the Salaf as-Salihun, by those righteous predecessors. And in this and in other places, and from the things that have always interested me, would be compiling a book of people and their usage of the word Salaf or Salafi, or the minhaj of the Salaf, so that people can understand this is not a new terminology. This is not a firqa from the firaq that came after. This is not a concept that was developed as something that is different than Islam. Instead, the word Salaf and the concept of being Salafi is something that existed way before Ibn Abdul Wahhab or Ibn Qayyim and Ibn Taymiyyah. And it goes all the way back to as long as there was a Salaf, there were people telling the people to follow the way of the Salaf. And like from the oldest people that I found actually using the word are people like Al-Awza'i and other than them from the Atba' al-Tabi'een. Talking about the Salaf regarding the Sahaba and the Tabi'een. The point of it is that anybody who tries to criticize the usage of the word Salaf or Salafi, here we see by saying Ibn Taymiyyah was the first, or Ibn Abdul Wahhab rahimahumullah was the first, then here we see Al-Lalaka'i rahimahullah, who died in the year 418, using this term, the Salaf. The fourth fundamental is that which was agreed upon by the Salaf as-Salihun. The fifth thing he says, and then holding on tight to all of it and being established upon it until the day of judgment. We can make that 6 if you want. The Kitab of Allah, the statement of the Messenger, the statements of the Sahaba, that which was agreed upon by the Salaf, holding on tight to all of that and being firm on it until the day of judgment, until you die. This is the fundamentals of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Because the word asl that we translate as fundamental, it has multiple meanings. And from its meanings is the sources, the evidence. What are the evidences or the sources or the most important things that Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah are upon? And so our asl is Kitabullah al-Mubin. وقول رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وصحابته الأخيار المتقين وما أجمع عليه السلف الصالحون والتمسك بمجموعها والمقام عليها إلى يوم الدين. These 6 things are the fundamentals of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, and these will be the things that you see the author explaining in this book. These are the 6 that are in the affirmative. And from the things that we see often in this religion is that it gathers between confirmation and negation. Because this is more comprehensive in establishing a reality. When establishing a reality of something, it requires affirming and denying. Affirming what the thing is and negating what the thing isn't. And neither one of them by themselves is as complete as the two of them are when done together. Even if confirmation or affirming is stronger than a simple denial or negating, when you put the two of them together, it gives even a greater establishment of the reality. And the greatest example of this is the statement, La ilaha illallah. There's no deity worthy of worship except Allah. We negate the worship of everything else. So there's no deity worthy of worship. But that negation, when we affirm with it, except Allah, then it gives it a much greater meaning than just simply saying Allah is worthy of worship. Simply saying Allah is worthy of worship doesn't negate the possibility that something else is worthy of worship. But when we say there's no deity worthy of worship except Allah, that gives the reality of the meaning of the worship of Allah a greater establishment, what we call in Arabic al-hasr. It benefits exclusivity, that only Allah is described with this. And like that is the case here. He mentioned 6 things that are in the affirmative. These are the 6 things that we do, that are the fundamentals of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. And then he's going to mention several things that are the negation, things that we don't do. And so he says, ثم الاجتناب عن البدع والاستماع إليها مما أحدثها المضلون, which becomes number 7. And if you want to, you can make it 8. He says, and then completely avoiding innovation. If you want to have the fundamentals of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, Quran, Sunnah, Sahaba, Salaf, hold on until the establishment of the Day of Judgment or until you die. Number 7, stay away from bid'ah. Completely stay away from innovation. Put yourself in one side and put innovation on the other side. ثم الاجتناب البدع, staying completely away from innovation. والاستماع إليها, even though you were on one side and innovation was on the other side, from the evils and the harms of innovation is that it might still reach you some of its information. So even if the people of innovation were over there and you were over here, the information still might reach you without you necessarily mixing with them while they're doing the innovation. So it's not enough to stay away from innovation, but you have to even stay away, number 8, from listening to it, from hearing it, from engaging with it in any form, i.e. don't participate in it. But even more than not participating in it is don't even lend it your ear. And subhanallah. Now you see why we as Salafi are always so severe in this matter. It's not enough that you don't do innovation, but you should also, as we see here from the fundamentals of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, you shouldn't even listen to innovation. Right? It's not enough to say, well, I'm not an innovator, but I'll listen to this person with the good that he talks about. When he's speaking about salat, I'll listen to him talk about salat, but I won't do the innovation that he does from X, Y, and Z. No, I have to avoid innovation, participating in it, just like I have to avoid listening to it. So he says, ثم الاجتناب البدع والاستماع إليها. Then, in addition to the 6 things, is staying completely away from innovation or listening to it from the things that were introduced into the religion by those who were misguided. Everything that was introduced into the religion by those who were misguided is innovation. As the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِيَّاكُمْ وَمُحْدَثَاتِ الْأُمُورِ. I advise you against, or I warn you against, or take precautions against newly invented matters. فَإِنَّ كُلَّ مُحْدَثَةٍ بِدْعَةٍ. Because every newly invented matter in the religion is a bid'ah, a dispraiseworthy innovation. وَكُلَّ بِدْعَةٍ ضَلَالَةٍ. And every innovation is misguidance. Who innovates? People who are misguided. وَكُلَّ ضَلَالَةٍ فِي النَّارِ. Where does their error, where does their misguidance lead them or entitle them to? The misguidance ends in the hellfire. And subhanAllah, this statement, just this sentence by itself is enough to have lectures and classes and series about. This is just the first paragraph. Innovation. Whoever does it, then he is misguided. It doesn't mean he's wrong about everything, but he is misguided in this innovation that he has done. And therefore we can't follow him in it. Man ahdatha fi amrina hadha ma laysa minhu fahuwa rad. Whoever introduces into this our affair that which is not from it, then it is rejected. وَمَنْ عَمَلَ عَمَلًا لَيْسَ عَلَيْهِ أَمْرُنَا فَهُوَ رَدٌّ. Whoever does an action that is not from our affair, then it is rejected. The one who innovated, we can't follow him in it. And the one or that which he innovated, we can't do. With the argument that they innovated, I'm just doing it. The one who innovated gets it rejected. The one who does it gets it rejected. The one who innovated is misguided. The one who does it is misguided. But what about things that were introduced by people who weren't innovators? I.e., views and opinions that are for matters that they call contemporary matters, nawazil, things that didn't exist during the time of the Prophet or the Salaf. Then that which is introduced from this fashion, like for example, rulings on electronic devices and computers, rulings on paper money, things of this nature, they didn't exist during the time of the Prophet. So that information, those statements, those rulings are technically new. Are they innovated? No, because the people who introduced that information, they introduced that information based on the usul, Quran, Sunnah, Sahaba, Salaf. They're holding fast to it. They're trying to establish it until they die. And they're avoiding in how they reach their decisions, innovation. They don't have an innovated method to reach their conclusions. And their understandings aren't derived from what was heard from the innovation. They don't use philosophy and intellect and experience and preference independently to arrive at their judgments. And so those things aren't being introduced by the mudillun. They're not being introduced by those who are astray. Instead, they're being solved, i.e. these contemporary issues, are being solved by those who are muhtadun. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُهْتَدِينَ. Right, this book, it guides even to things that weren't around during the time of the Prophet. I think that's an important distinction to be made between things that are innovated, things that people introduce out of misguidance, out of ignorance about the fundamentals, and things that are introduced or discussed or solved that are based on the fundamentals. And like this, you understand how to combat those who might say that there's good innovation and bad innovation. The things that they consider to be good innovation in reality aren't innovation. They are derived from these fundamentals, from these usul. And the usul are exactly that. They're the foundation. So how could the foundation be new? The foundation is old. It's just that you didn't know that this room was in the house until you opened that door. Until they built that new wing on the house, it wasn't there, but the foundation existed already. So it's the same house, it just has a new wing. You've added a new bedroom, a new living room, but the house is still the same old house. As opposed to somebody who tries to develop or establish a new foundation and build on top of that. then this individual deserves the title innovator. And his action deserves the title innovation because he's not working from the same usul. We'll finish with this paragraph. He says, فَهَذِهِ الْوَصَايَا الْمَوْرُوثَةَ الْمَتْبُوعَةَ وَالْآثَارُ الْمَحْفُوظَةُ الْمَنْقُولَةُ وطرائق الحق المسلوكة ودلائل اللائحة المشهورة والحجج الباهرة المنصورة التي عملت عليها الصحابة والتابعون ومن بعدهم من خاصة الناس وعامتهم من المسلمين واعتقدوها حجة فيما بينهم وبين الله رب العالمين ثم من اقتدى بهم من الأئمة المهتدين واقتفى آثارهم من المتبعين واجتهد في سلوك سبيل المتقين وكان مع الذين اتقوا والذين هم محسنون. The author, he says, فَهَذِهِ الْوَصَايَا. So these advices, these final statements, this advice, these 8 things that we mentioned, is what has been inherited by us and what is to be followed. These wasaya, this advice, is that inherited advice. We didn't introduce it. We didn't make it up. Instead, we took it from those before us. And we follow it. We don't go somewhere else. We got our inheritance and we follow it. And these are the athar al-mahfudatul manqula. And these are the traces and the remnants and the artifacts and the footsteps that are preserved. While the non-believer looks at the artifacts and the traces and the ruins of ancient Rome and ancient Greece and their civilizations, our artifacts, our traces that we follow, our footsteps that we follow behind that have been preserved are these points that we mentioned. The Prophet ﷺ, I've left you on bayda, layluha kanahariha, la yazigu anha illa halik. I left you on something clear, white. Its nighttime is just as obvious as it's daytime. Their ruins they have to dig and excavate and move away the dust, study, find locations, search maps, etc. Our history, our inheritance, our traces, our artifacts, our things that we use in getting back to our roots and going back to our past, all of it has been preserved. All of it is mahfudha. Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikr wa inna lahu lahafidhun. Allah says, indeed, we sent down the dhikr and we're going to preserve it. Ibn Mas'ud, he said, al-ilmu wal-iman makanahuma, man ibtaghahuma wajadahuma. Knowledge and iman are at their spot. Whoever searches for the two of them finds them because they're preserved. And since they're preserved, they're transmitted generation after generation. The same way we're sitting here now getting this information is the same way we got the or giving this information is the same way we got the information from our educators and how their educators got it from their educators all the way back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is important. And I find it something that a lot of times we have to remind ourselves of. Repeat the information often. Transmit it over and over again. You learned it. You know it. MashaAllah. But there's somebody beside you who doesn't yet. And like this, you find the Salafi constantly repeating this information. Things that we learned 10, 15, maybe even 20 years ago. And we think that it's common knowledge because everybody that's in our circle knows it. And so we say we can go and do something else. We can talk about something else. We can move on. MashaAllah, we learned Tawheed a long time ago. Wa'iyadhu billah. From that type of statement. We say, no, repeat it. Do it again. You did Thalathat al-Usul, do it again. You did Kitab al-Tawheed, do it again. You did Sharh Sunnah al-Barbahari, do it again. Because even though you might have did it in this masjid, did you do it in that masjid? And there's a new Shahada who accepted Islam a week ago. He didn't get it yet. And your children, they don't know the information unless you teach it to them. They don't come out the womb understanding this. And so just because you know it, you have to transmit it. وهذا حق وهذا واجب. This is an obligation. You learn and you teach. And you are patient. Subhanallah. ثلاثة الأصول. معرفة الله. ودينه ورسوله. Teaching it. الصبر على الأذى فيه. الدعوة إليه. Before that. All of these things, you repeat it. The point is that the author, he says that these are the traces or the footsteps that have been preserved and transmitted. I can see exactly where the Salaf were, exactly where they went. Their footsteps are etched in the ground. He says, وَطَرَائِقُ الْحَقِّ الْمَسْلُوكَ. And these are the pathways of truth that have been traversed. SubhanAllah. We're over time, so excuse me. I want to finish this paragraph. As I said, this is for me more than it is for anyone else. It's lovely to just re-go over these things. The pathways of truth that have been traversed. Nobody takes financial advice from a broke person. Nobody takes dieting advice from an overweight individual. Nobody takes marriage advice from somebody who's always divorced. When you take the advice, you want to take the advice of the one who succeeded. You ask, where do I learn how to speak Arabic? You don't talk to the people who did a book and didn't finish. You talk to the people who succeeded. How did you guys learn Arabic? You want to learn the religion. You don't talk to the people who have been busy for 15 years, 20 years, and still are in minor stages of information and understanding. You take it from the scholars who, in their time, have accomplished and excelled. And so these pathways that we follow, if you want to be on the correct pathway, you don't take it from the new sprouts and the people who have just shown up. Instead, you follow the pathway of those that have traveled and reached their destination. The Sahaba, they reached their destination. There are people, radiyallahu anhum wa radu anhu. There are people Allah is already pleased with and they're pleased with him. So if you want to know how to follow the truth, how to be upon the truth, you need to follow the pathways that were traveled already by the people who are on the truth. Find those footsteps. Find those artifacts. Find those traces. And you'll see that you're not the only one on it. You'll see that people have actually reached their destination following that path. As opposed to the pathways of philosophy, how many people have succeeded? Compared to the thousands upon thousands, if not millions upon billions of people who have used that methodology, how many of them have reached the levels, the heights? But when we look at the pathway of truth, those who follow this methodology, how many of them have reached the destination? ثُلَّةٌ مِّنَ الْأَوَّلِينَ وَثُلَّةٌ مِّنَ الْآخِرِينَ. Right? The point is that the author, he says about these pathways that they've been traveled. So you can rest assured following it, knowing that you'll reach your destination. He says, وَالدَّلَائِلُ اللَّائِحَةُ الْمَشْهُورَةُ. And these advices that we mentioned, these 8 things, are the evidences that are clear to see and famous. They're the evidences that everybody recognizes them. They're like the billboards on the highway. Everybody, and subhanAllah, just think of like the detailing of his mentioning, al-la'iha, like a billboard, like a poster. You can see it from a distance. The beauty in his words. You're on a pathway walking. You found the footsteps. You were searching. For all of you new Muslims who have an affinity to video games and those RPGs, those role-playing games where you're looking for the new treasure. and you're searching around the village. You see the sign from a distance. You found the traces and you see the sign from a distance. You know exactly where the starting point is. Because the evidence that led you here, the dalil, and the word dalil, it literally means guide. Right? The word we use for evidence, dalil, it literally means guide. The guide that brought you here was a big, obvious sign. Famous. Everybody knows. Meet me by the old clock tower. It's a famous sign that everybody recognizes. فهذه الدلائل اللائحة المشهورة. These signposts and these billboards and these posters and these markings that led you to the truth or that lead to the truth are famous. Everybody knows about them. Everybody knows about them. Subhanallah. فكيف نضل? How can we be misguided after this? كيف نجهل? Why would we be ignorant after this? Wallahi innahu li'irad. Wallahi, it's nothing more than turning away from the straight path. نسأل الله أن يديمنا أن يديمنا على الحق وأن يثبتنا عليه. نسأل الله أن يرينا الحق حقا ويرزقنا اتباعه ويرينا باطلا باطلا ويرزقنا اجتنابه. Inshallah, continuing on, he says, والحجج الباهرة المنصورة التي عملت عليها الصحابة والتابعون ومن بعدهم من خاصة الناس وعامتهم. It is the clear arguments, the overpowering, al-bahira, right? The overpowering arguments that are victorious. You want to win in the debate. You want to establish the haqq. You want to overcome your opponent. Wallahi, it's not by your intellect. It's not by your looks. It's not by your physical strength. The way you win is with these wasaya. And the winning is not just in the life to come. It's in this life. فَأَيَّدْنَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا عَلَىٰ عَدُوِّهِمْ فَأَصْبَحُوا ظَاهِرِينَ. We assisted those who had iman over their enemies, and so they became victorious. Now, so the point of it is that these arguments, these points, these debate points that you can use, this proof that you can use, it overpowers and gains victory. And it is what was used by the Sahaba. SubhanAllah. Yafiq. It's enough of a sharaf, of an honor and a prestige, that my arguments are the same arguments that people used. I'm using the same points. And this is a benefit because there's no new misguidance. Even though it's called bid'ah, new, wallahi ya ikhwan, the reality of it, there's no new bid'ah. Meaning all they do is recycle the same old bid'ah. They put another name on it. They put it in another bag. They decorate it, but it's the same innovation. They do the same things. They do the same things. Takfir, Khawarij, now they call it politics. Nation of Islam, same thing as the Jahmiyyah, the Mu'tazila. They have the same beliefs in certain aspects. Qadr. All of these things that the author is going to speak about. So in knowing these points, we'll be able to be victorious in establishing the truth against the contemporary innovation. And this is why, wallahi, we're over time, subhanAllah. This is why we have to learn these things. People, they say often, why? The Jahmiyyah don't exist no more. The Mu'tazila, they don't exist no more. Right? Why do we have to learn about them? Why do we got to learn about the Qadariyah? Everybody knows about Qadr now. Why do we have to learn about Irja? Why do these people don't exist anymore? We say, la, batil. The truth is that they do exist. One, they exist themselves, the direct descendants of these people, who still claim to be Mu'tazila, who still claim to be Asha'ira, who still claim to be Qadiriyya, etc. They themselves exist. Additionally, their descendants exist. Those who have taken their ideas and repackaged them. So how do we gain victory over them in establishing the truth. Wallahi, it's not by violence in every situation. It's not by force in every situation. Instead, the foundation is these hujaj al-bahira, al-mansura, these victorious, overpowering arguments that were used by the Salaf, the Sahaba and the Tabi'un and those who followed them from the special people, khasa, the special group of people, the scholars of the past, wal-am, as well as the common people. Wallahi, and this is the thing that we're going to circle around often in this. The common people in the past were upon this methodology. Nowadays we see it's the opposite, unfortunately. Sometimes, a lot of times, the common people, al-awam liman sabaq, the general people, follow whoever got there first. And we see nowadays the people of innovation, they have a sa'i. They have good effort in what they do, spreading their innovation. And the Salafi, sometimes we're too preoccupied with things that are criticizable amongst us, like fighting amongst ourselves, arguing amongst ourselves, jealousy sometimes. Sometimes we are preoccupied with not learning the religion appropriately, thinking we have obtained or reached a level that suffices us. From the things that we can be criticized sometimes about, some of us, not intermixing, and I don't mean intermixing like hanging out with the people of innovation, but actually getting out there and calling them to the truth. Writing books, corresponding, refuting the innovation with the goal of guidance and bringing people back to the truth. Sometimes you find us in our communities, we become isolated. That's the Salafi masjid, and we don't always go out and call the non-Muslim or the astray Muslim. And obviously these things take thought and understanding on how is the best way to do it. And may Allah reward our brothers in various cities who do these things. And may Allah make us from those who establish Islam in our homes and outside. The point is that the past, the general people were on these principles. But when we became negligent and our strength became weak, وَلَا تَنَازِعُوا فَتَفْشَلُوا فَتَذْهَبُ رِيحُكُمْ. Don't argue so you'll become weak, and your aura, or your air, your presence will go away. When that happened, we found the people of innovation taking that opportunity, jumping into the space, and thus taking hold of the general people. And that's why we say often, it's necessary for us to fill that gap. Why is the general masses in need of people like Anwar al-Awlaki to teach them about the seerah and the sahaba and the tabi'een? Why are they listening to his dars? Because there's not enough Salafi individuals teaching that to the people. Why are people still attached to somebody like Ahmed Deedat, for example, when it comes to calling the Christians? Because there's not enough Salafis in our circles doing that. And so we need to fill the gap. Why do people say that we need to go learn Quran from people who are Ash'ari or Maturidi? Because there's not enough Salafis doing it. We need to fill the gap so that the general people will come back where they belong. We need to build masajid. Nice masajid. Not extremely decorative and fancy, but masajid that can hold the people and that welcome the people and that the people feel comfortable in. We need good character. We need to get back to our basics, our basics and our basis, which is bringing the people back to these principles. And when we do it, we'll find ourselves successful. I really want to finish this paragraph, so bear with me, inshallah. He says, these are the arguments that were overpowering and victorious that were used by the people, the Sahaba and the Tabi'een and those who came after them, from the specific people or the special people, as well as the general people from the Muslims. وَاعْتَقَدُوهَا حُجَّةً فِيمَا بَيْنَهُمْ وَبَيْنَ اللَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. And they believed that these things would be what would establish their argument between them and Allah. I.e., these would be the things that they would use as the evidence when they're questioned on the day of judgment. Right? رُسُلًا مُبَشِّرِينَ وَمُنذِرِينَ لِأَنْ لَا يَكُونَ لِلنَّاسِ عَلَى اللَّهِ حُجَّةٌ بَعْدَ الرُّسُلِ. Right? This would be the argument that they would use. And when Allah asked them, why did you do this? They would say, it was in the Quran. It was in the Sunnah. It was what the Sahaba did. It's what the Salaf agreed upon. I held fast to that. I died upon that. And I stayed away from the innovation. And I didn't even listen to it. This is what they will use to establish their point when they're being held accountable by Allah, the Lord of all that is created. He says, then, ثُمَّ مَنْ اقْتَدَى بِهِمْ مِنَ الْأَئِمَّةِ الْمُهْتَدِينَ. In the early generations, the Sahaba, the Tabi'een, and the general and the special people from those generations, they were all upon this. And as we're going to see later, he's still doing this clever introduction because he's telling us how he's going to be talking about the book. Then, after those special generations, those Qurun al-Mufaddala, those preferred generations, we found innovation starting popping up. But during that time, we found the A'imma al-Muhtadeen still upon that older way. The leaders of Islam who were properly guided were still upon the way of the Sahaba and the Tabi'een. You find people like Imam Malik, like Imam al-Shafi'i, like Imam Ahmed, like Abu Ubaid al-Qasim ibn Salam, the Hammadain, the Sufyanain, right? You find these people, the A'immas, right? At-Tabari after them. You find the generation still coming till you get to Al-Lalakai, until you get to Ibn Taymiyyah, until you get to Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, till you get to Bin Baz and Uthaymeen and Albani and Sheikh Fawzan, Hafidhallahu al-Ahya'u minhum wa rahim al-amwat. Until you find that all of these A'imma were on that same way of those before. وَاقْتَفَى آثَارَهُمْ مِنَ الْمُتَّبِعِينَ. And then those who followed those leaders, like us, right? We're not leaders of the religion. We're not a'imma, right? We're individuals who follow these pillars and these mountains and these leaders of the religion. You find us following them on that same path. So you have the Sahaba and the Tabi'een, the general and the special. Then you have the leaders of Islam throughout the generations. Then you have those who follow the leader. All of them were on these principles. وَاجْتَهَدَ فِي سُلُوكِ سَبِيلِ الْمُتَّقِينَ. And they all put their effort, their strong effort in following the path of those that had piety, that did what Allah said and stayed away from what Allah said to stay away from. And thus, what was the result? مَنْ كَانَ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. The author, he says, وَكَانَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ مُحْسِنُونَ. When they followed these principles, the Sahaba, the Tabi'een, the A'imma, the followers, they stayed upon it. They tried their hardest to follow that path, those transmitted footsteps, those billboards and those landmarks that were obvious, those guides that were clear, those pathways that were well traversed. What did it all lead to? Where did it all end up at? It ended up at them being with them. It ended up at them being with them. The author, he says, وَكَانَ, his statement, مَعَ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ مُحْسِنُونَ. They ended up being with those who had piety and those who were righteous doers. وَكَمَا عَرَفْتُمْ الْمَرْءُ مَعَ مَنْ أَحَبَّ. As you all know, the individual is with the person that he loves. And as Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, there's nothing that brought me as much joy as hearing this about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the person is with the one he loves. Because I love Allah and his messenger and Abu Bakr and Umar, even though my actions are lesser than them. And so this was the joy that I would get to be with them because the person is with the one that he loves. So if you love them, Wahada is a statement to all of us who claim Salafiyah. If you love them and you want to be with them, فَعَلَيْكَ بِهَذِهِ الْأُصُولِ. then upon you is these usul. It's necessary. It's mandatory. It's wajib. أوجب ما يكون على المرء. The most obligatory thing that can be upon a person. So these 8 things, Quran, Sunnah, Sahaba, Salaf, hold fast until you die. Stay away from innovation. Don't even listen to it. What did I miss? Quran, Sunnah, way of the Salaf. Quran, Sunnah, Sahaba, way of the Salaf. Hold fast upon it. Hold fast to it. Stay on it till you die. Avoid innovation. Be completely separate. Don't participate in innovation. And don't even listen to it. This is the usul that the author is going to explain. Jazakumullahu khayra al-jaza ala sabrikum ma'i. May Allah reward you the greatest rewards for being so patient with me. As I said, we try not to go over 30 minutes, but it's hard to put the book down. Wallahi, it's hard to put the book down. For jazakumullahu khayr, that you all given me this opportunity to review something that maybe Allah will benefit it or benefit me with it in this life and the next. I ask Allah to make it beneficial for us and for you. Rabbana آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وأرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وإلى اللقاء إن شاء الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.